Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to this edition of our program, Jones and Company. On this program, we examine the national issues of the Bahamas. There's a lot to be said for financial services in the Bahamas and investment opportunities in our country. This year, 2020, some people say should be a good year. And there are some people who are not as optimistic. But today on our program, we seek to learn more about investment opportunities and the financial services sector of the Bahamas. Our guest on the program today is Brian Jones, who is the Managing Director of Leno Corporate Services. He has been involved in financial services for many years and has worked in offshore banks in our country, and it's a pleasure to have him here on our program today. Brian Jones, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Godfrey Enius, good to see you.
Nice to be here with your nephew, Mr. Brian Jones.
Yes, Brian has been involved in financial services for how many years now?
About 16, going on 16.
16 years. Mm-hmm. Good. And you started out in private banking?
That's right. So I actually started out at the Winterbotham Trust Company, right back in 2004. And I spun out their funds area out of the corporate services department and really started to grow that business for them.
Okay. And you moved from there to
UBS. So I moved from a financial institution where the headquarters was here to a Swiss bank, right? The largest Swiss bank, as a matter of fact, to kind of get some experience in the international wealth management arena. And I did that. That actually led me to a short-term assignment to Brazil, where I was living, in fact, with my family, learning Portuguese for about 7 months.
Okay. And I think you were Managing Director of Deltec
Fund Services.
Fund Services.
That's correct. So that's where I transitioned from UBS back to a Bahamian headquartered international wealth management group, where I headed up the funds area once again. So I've really always been concentrated on funds, and now at Leno, I've essentially branched out to different lines of business.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you were advising a young Bahamian who was interested in preparing himself by going to college for financial services, what would you tell them?
Right. Well, I would tell them that they should be looking to take on some sort of a multidisciplinary approach to their studies, right? Because these days, while it pays to be a specialist, if your knowledge is really only limited to one area, it's very difficult for you to connect the dots and see the relevance in other fields. So as an example, I would say we know that the new digital economy is really emerging, right? And that all sorts of industries and services are impacted by technology. So, but being a technologist alone, right? A computer scientist, a data scientist alone won't necessarily give you the knowledge and know-how or exposure to know how to apply that technical knowledge. So I would recommend a dual major in some sort of technology-based field, along with coupling that with some sort of the different sciences, social sciences, actual sciences, and the like, right? Just so that you have a dynamic knowledge base that you can then build on.
So did your university training prepare you for your profession?
In some ways, yes. So I actually had a liberal arts university experience where I specialized I majored in economics, and I also studied Spanish, and I became fluent in Spanish while I was studying. But I always said that my undergrad degree in economics, because it was from a liberal arts university, it really only laid the foundation for me to learn, how to apply knowledge, how to research, right? So ever since I graduated university, I never ceased studying. So every year I would do some sort of certification or some knowledge building exercise.
Tell us, Brian, about the state of financial services in the Bahamas today?
Well, the state, I would say, is definitely in flux, right? Because the traditional way of doing business and a lot of the traditional value propositions that the Bahamas would have offered historically may not be relevant anymore as we move into the future, and we've seen a decline, right? Some sort of contraction in financial services as a result. And I would say that while the major industry players recognize the challenges, opportunities are also presented. And I think the whole entire industry, when you find yourself in a state of flux, you're behooved to kind of reflect, to build, right, to do research and development and find how you're going to reposition or pivot your business model to remain relevant in the future. Because if you don't continue to grow and evolve, we know what happens.
There's been a shifting in the financial services
That's correct.
Industry over the years.
That's right.
And the focus of institutions in the Bahamas changed over the years as well. There was a time when people focused on the European business.
That's right.
Now, I believe they're focusing more now on business from South America.
That's right. The markets have definitely evolved as it relates to financial services. And I mean, I can personally attest to that. I came into the industry 16 years ago, and we already started to see that shift then. I was part of the strategic shift in that direction, right? Because it was more organic because of just demand. Where's the demand coming from, right? So it started to be a natural pull. But the Bahamas actually took a strategic a decision to focus on Latin America and actually Brazil in particular about 15 years ago. And that was around the time I started traveling there constantly. So my strategy actually was aligned with the Bahamas' strategy for financial services. But that being said, the markets continue to evolve, right? The Bahamas Financial Services Board has made a push into the Middle East, into Asia. Just last year in November, we were in Dubai doing presentations. We were, and then of course, they're planning further trips. We call these landfall trips, whereby we host Bahamas-based, Bahamas-themed events. We make sure there's a lot of media coverage. We in fact we try our best to involve the local advocates in those jurisdictions who can then also vouch for us. And the strategy actually has been working quite well, and that's why it continues to go on. But the markets are continuing to evolve, and I expect that to continue even further, right? And the last point I'll make on that is that in order to build a presence in new markets, you actually have to be present, right? Bahamians who are seeking to grow their client base internationally actually need to get out there and obtain those clients, right? You secure those clients through a number of business development strategies. But historically, a lot of the business was referred to the Bahamas, okay? We never necessarily had to go out and hunt for it, right? We were more of the farmers, right? The hunters would go out there and send it in. When I say hunters, we had business referred from head offices around the world through different other financial intermediaries. But now the world is entirely flat. A lot of the services that we used to offer are ubiquitous, right? So how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we attract new clientele to the Bahamas from new markets, right? And it's about going out there and obtaining those clients.
Mr. Jones, it seems to me, not just in your field, that we in the Bahamas do not recognize transformations, all right? And because we don't recognize transformations, we're always behind the ball rather than ahead of the ball. We're always trying to catch up, all right? And sometimes the horse has bolted the barn, and catching up is a challenge.
It is.
And I think one of the reasons why we are not transformational is because professionals in those fields are not studying or understanding what the global trends are. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think you make a good point. You make a good point, and I personally believe that in order to thrive in the new economy,
You gotta be ahead.
you have to be ahead. You have
Yeah.
to be proactive, right? So what does that mean? There's a number of strategies for being proactive, right? Professionally, right? You can study, right? You can determine, okay, what are the trends, the trends out there? We know a lot of the trends that are impacting our business are tech related, but many people have no technological experience, right? It seems a bit daunting then to now to say, okay, now do I have to learn how to write code? Do I need to learn how to become a network engineer or something like that in order to just to
keep up?
To keep up.
Yeah.
And I say no, because it goes back to my point I was making about building knowledge on the university level, being multidisciplinary. The technologist who doesn't understand the business side needs someone who understands the business side
To make him relevant.
to make him relevant.
Yeah.
Right? When I think one of the ways to be progressive is to be more collaborative, right? Amongst ourselves, right? Quite often we operate in silos, and I think more collaborations also needed between government and private sector. We have Bahamas Financial Services Board as an interlocutor, but I also believe that there can be more done to collaborate.
How progressive are we in the Bahamas in financial services? Because there's a view, Brian, that we have not been progressive, and that we are always in the catching up mode, and that we react to the vagaries of what's happening in the international financial services sector, and that we are dictated to by these offshore organizations, OECD and others. How progressive have we been?
All right, so I want to tackle that question from two different tracks. First of all, you have the regulatory environment, right, where we've seen many challenges, and to your point, we've definitely been in catch-up mode as it relates to complying with regulations. But that is, in fact, the nature of regulations, that they themselves, the regulators, are perpetually in catch-up mode, right? So they're trying to regulate activity that's actually occurring, right?
But shouldn't they be proactive?
Now, to that point, there can be a large degree of more proactivity in that sense, because we know well in advance when these initiatives are being proposed, what the conditions are, and generally what the timelines are to comply. And historically, we can see the evidence that we've waited till the last minute in many cases to comply, right? But we do tend to but what that does, it distracts from innovation. It distracts from actual business generation activity, business development. You know, if the minister has to travel to Paris to meet with the OECD, he can also be on a BFSB landfall promoting the Bahamas at the same time, right? So there's two competing forces, and I feel as though we've also been in catch-up mode in terms of our activity, our business activity, right? Business planning and strategy. But I can't speak for every individual business, right? But I do know that there are some very progressive businesses out there. The problem is that they're few and far between. We can't say that it's a bona fide trend within financial services that the firms are progressive, right? We don't see the evidence of that. But there are certain initiatives being undertaken now. So, for example, the Chamber of Commerce has just initiated a digital transformation committee, which I'm a member and vice chair, and to look at practical ways to help businesses transform themselves digitally, right? To remain relevant and to benefit from technology in terms of reducing costs, increasing efficiency, and the like, right? All of the benefits that we see come with technology.
Mr. Jones, we live in a country, where there's a tendency to blame the government for everything, all right? And my view is that that is the wrong avenue, because we should be blaming the professionals, right? Because we are too government dominated,
True.
all right? Our neighbor, the US, is private sector driven. They even draft legislation for the government.
That's true.
That is why they have lobbyists
Correct.
who ensure that the government is on pace or on track. But in this country, we wait for the government to do everything.
That's right. They tend to move forward as long as the activity they want to conduct is not illegal. They move forward, and instead of asking for permission, they prefer to ask for forgiveness later and comply. And you know.
But I think that's the problem with your field. You all professionals wait for the government. Governments change. People got to understand the industry, and so it's a constraint on advancement.
I tend to agree with you to the extent that in financial services, given the level of risk and given the state of flux that the industry is in, you may see incumbents who want to get into new lines of business that are very innovative, that might not be legislated for as yet, not want to move too proactively because they might be afraid of some sort of regulatory backlash, because the regulators are essentially in a conservative mode, right? Because they're making efforts, the government is making efforts to comply, right? To do something out of left field might not necessarily, bode well, but that's not an excuse. I do agree with you that, and in fact, I was starting to allude to that initially, that it's up to the firms to innovate and for the regulators to catch up, right? And as long as you are not violating any laws,
exactly,
as long as you are cognizant and doing your best to adhere to any best practices that can be observed objectively on an international basis, even in the absence of standards, right? So you have emerging technologies like blockchain and cryptocurrencies where you do not have global standards yet to say, okay, this is a cohesive framework for conducting this type of international business that essentially is borderless to a large extent. So we're operating in the absence of global standards. How do you maneuver, right? Mm-hmm. So you still can still act prudently, right? You can still act ethically, right, in your business activity.
Because you're not breaking the rules.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mr. Jones, you have been involved, I believe, in the development of certain products in the financial services sector. And product development in the sector is extremely important.
It is.
I remember one time you told me you had something to do with the Smart Fund or something?
That's right, 007.
007?
Yes.
How successful was that?
Well, since it was released in 2014, it has been the most popular smart fund model.
Is that right?
That's right.
And so it has created a whole lot of business for the Bahamas.
It has created a significant business. It's allowed us to remain relevant, I think, as a investment fund's domicile, primarily because it is innovative and flexible at the same time, while it's still a regulated investment fund. So it offers this nice hybrid approach to structuring a fund. Now, there was more innovation since then, and there's still actually more occurring, specifically in funds. Since then, we've also created the Icon, which is an investment fund vehicle. That concept actually did not exist in the Bahamas before we introduced it. It was mirrored on the Brazilian investment fund vehicle concept. It's called an investment condominium, okay? And this investment condominium, the only thing it can be used for is to operate as an investment fund. Previously, we would set up companies or partnership structures or even a unit trust and license that to operate as a fund. But now we actually have a fund vehicles, which is very unique in the common law world, because Brazil is a civil law jurisdiction. So in the common law world, it's a novel concept to have a fund vehicle, and that's actually seen considerable traction as well.
Yeah.
And the last leg of the innovation, I would say, in the fund sector has been an entirely new investment funds legislative regime, where we have the Act, came out in September 2019, and now the regulations are in their final stage.
it is said that the clearing banks in the Bahamas got high liquidity.
Yes.
All right. Why don't people like you, who in financial services, establish some relationship with these banks and create some sort of fund of Bahamian dollars, whereby Bahamians or foreigners can have access to that to assist in developing the Bahamas and thereby expanding our economy?
Well, to the point regarding the amount of deposits, there is a lot of what we call quote unquote dry powder sitting on bank accounts that are essentially just not being used, right? And if you're not earning interest on your money, you're actually losing money, right? Due to inflation, et cetera. So people do want to put their money to work. I think we know that because we talk to our clients and we know that there's unmet demand for investments here locally in Bahamian dollars, right, to your point. And in fact, that's one of our main objectives at Leno. In fact, it goes right back to our motto, which is bridging possibilities, right? Leno means bridge in Latin, or go-between. And it's really our goal to create access and opportunities for Bahamians in capital markets. We want to see more capital market activity because that will drive the economy, right? So if you look at, well, why don't we have enough capital market activity? Generally, the only source of capital in any economy is savings, right? So we spoke that there's a lot of it sitting up.
Right, right.
But who's holding it, right? It's concentrated in very few hands, right? So we need more economic empowerment generally, right? So we need a self-enforcing virtuous cycle in our capital markets. And it does start with bringing some opportunities to market, right?
Let's speak some more about Leno Corporate Services. You explained that it's a Latin word, is it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Leno, it means go between or bridge in Latin.
Okay.
That's right.
And how long has it been in operation?
This summer is going to make 10 years.
Okay.
That's right.
And it has been doing a number of portfolios, or creating portfolios for people?
Right, so a quick overview. Leno is actually the third largest asset manager in the Bahamas. We gained that ranking after we acquired Family Guardian's capital markets wealth management business early last year. So we're ranking number 3. The largest portion of our asset management book is corporate pensions, right? But we do have a number of active brokerage clients. We have a number of outsourced services that we offer as well. We do payroll, VAT filings for a number of firms, primarily sole proprietorships like dentists and lawyers and doctors. We also we have a fund administration platform. So now we're actually setting up and administering funds for third-party managers. So not only do we have a suite of Leno funds that we have on offer for Bahamians to invest in, but we actually have third-party funds on our platform now that are available internationally. And the last element I think I'd highlight right now, other than our corporate services area where we're pretty active, is our trust company. So we have the Leno Trust Company, which was incorporated last year. We were licensed by the central bank, headed up by Diane Bingham, who's very well known in the industry. And we kind of kicking off that arm of the business, we acquired the trust arm of Bank of the Bahamas. So we've launched that with about $100 million in the trust book from day one.
So in addition to doing a whole lot of local business,
Yes.
you're still in the offshore banking business?
Absolutely. So with the new, well, we have a level playing field now after some of the regulations that were passed at the end of 2018, whereby this dichotomy of offshore versus onshore, essentially that thin line, that divide can be erased, right? So that's what we've effectively done at Leno, where as a Bahamian firm, where we're a resident for exchange control purposes, we've been authorized by the central bank as an authorized agent and dealer to then deal in international markets and take on international clients.
Okay.
Mr. Jones,
And this is what we've been quite active. Thank you.
I know a lot of people, all right, who are scratching their heads daily, wondering where to put their money. All right? Because if you put it in the savings account, even if you put it on a long-term fixed deposit, you're not getting anything for your money.
Right.
All right? So people are looking to increase their wealth through funds which may be created to facilitate investment.
Right.
All right? And that doesn't seem to be a common feature in this jurisdiction for Bahamians.
That's right.
All right?
Right. So this
Because
is,
if there are few places you can make money.
That's right. And this is one of the main reasons I wanted to join Leno, right? To increase investment opportunities for Bahamians. I can give you a few examples of things we're doing. Because it wasn't just for the funds and other things, or to even grow the international side, which is I'm heavily focused on that. My main passion is really opening up opportunities for Bahamians.
Yeah.
So, for example, one that we've recently brought to market is the BPC Investment Fund, right? This is Bahamas Petroleum Company. Now, this fund currently is limited to professional investors, right? So those are institutional investors, or Bahamians who have a net worth, not liquid cash, but net worth, and that could include real estate or whatever, of $1 million, right? Or if your annual income exceeds $250,000 on your own, or $300,000 with your spouse, then you qualify as a professional investor under our legislation, and you can buy into the fund. And this is the first potential commercially viable oil find in the history of the Bahamas.
Stick a pin right there. We're gonna talk about that in great detail because Leno is officially the fund manager.
We're the manager, administrator, and we sit on the board of directors.
Good. We're gonna pursue that. Let's take a break here on our program. This is Jones and Company. Our guest today is Brian Jones, who is the managing director of Leno. We take this break. We'll come right back.